All right, hey, what's up, guys? Thank you so much for having me today. Today we're going to talk about how to speak investor and buy your first rental property. So, obviously we're all agents in here, but there are so many benefits to owning real estate as a real estate agent, and then also just understanding how to invest in Charleston specifically is crucial information that you can pass on to your clients. So if we haven't met yet, my name is Shawn. I'm a realtor here in the West Ashley Market Center. I'm an investor enthusiast. I own 10 rentals across 6 properties, all in the Charleston metro. A couple in Goose Creek, one in Hanahan, one in Mount Pleasant, and then one in West Ashley. And I do everything. All my portfolio is single-family homes, and what I do with those single-family homes is I convert them to their highest and best use, whether that's rent by the room, short-term rental, mid-term rental, long-term rental, or even rent by the room in one case. And a little else about me, if you guys don't know, I'm a former naval officer, and by education, an engineer and MBA. So today what we're going to talk about is why do we want to own real estate? What are the advantages of owning real estate? And then how do we calculate a real estate deal? And what are some of the common terminology in the investor space? How do we close on deals? From acquisition to financing to an exit strategy? How do we analyze a deal? And then some other crucial information at the very end. So what I want to start with is a spectrum of leverage. The spectrum of leverage is just, on one end you got the Dave Ramsey camp, and on the other end, who's that? Robert Kiyosaki, exactly. It's Robert Kiyosaki. Where Robert Kiyosaki is saying debt is great, debt is the best thing since sliced bread, Dave Ramsey's like, all debt's the same, debt is evil, get out of debt. Ultimately, you're going to fall somewhere on this spectrum with your comfort level. Your comfort level should guide your investing choices, but you need to be aware of analysis paralysis. Analysis paralysis is going to keep you on the sidelines because investing in real estate is uncomfortable, especially if you haven't done it before. It will be uncomfortable, and so that will keep you on the sidelines if you're not cautious. All right, so what I want to first start off with is why do we want to buy investment real estate? What's the advantages? And this is not just as a real estate agent, but also a real estate investor. Why do we buy investment real estate? Well, the first advantage is obviously principal pay down. We have appreciation, cash flow, buying equity, like I like to call it buying equity. We'll talk about that here in a second. And then a lot of tax benefits. So, and one other thing, why do we want to invest in Charleston in particular? Well, Charleston has that growing tech industry, a very, very strong military presence. Both the Navy and the Air Force are here in full force. We have a pretty large Coast Guard base as well. We're one of the top 10 ports in the United States in terms of TEU, 20-foot equivalent units. And as you know, Charleston is a regional and a national tourism destination. And all these factors are great, and there's other places in the country that also have these factors. What else does Charleston have though? This is key when we're choosing an investment market. Charleston has positive population growth and wage growth. Because of the aforementioned reasons, we have that wage growth and the population growth. So that's kind of boosting the housing market. That's creating a tailwind on the regional level. And when you hear the national narratives, well, national narratives don't apply to the regional level. You have to look at the regional level or the local level and see what's actually happening on the ground. And in Charleston, we have a lot of tailwinds that are favoring investors. All right, so principal paydown. One of the advantages of owning real estate is principal paydown. It is insignificant for most investors because on average, most investors will hold property anywhere from 3 to 5 years. Though there are investors who, want to just buy a property forever and hold it forever. And in that case, principal paydown can be significant. But where interest rates are right now, where the amortization schedule falls, in the first, half or 20 years of ownership, it's usually not favorable or it's not significant enough to make life-changing money. But if you hold it out for the entire term of your loan, then it could be pretty significant. One more thing on principal paydown before we go to appreciation is that principal paydown, what people don't realize is when you're paying down principal, you're essentially paying off a loan. You're increasing your equity in the property. And so when we're analyzing a deal, and say a deal is in a great area, in a great location, and has everything you want, but you're ready to invest in real estate, but it doesn't cash flow by $50 a month, but you're paying $300 a month or $400 a month in principal pay down, well, that deal kind of makes sense then. If you can see it from that lens, never mind all the other benefits of owning real estate, like tax benefits. But that's principal pay down. Appreciation, appreciation is where people make their wealth in real estate. You're not going to make crazy money on principal pay down, at least not quickly. You're not going to make crazy money on cash flow. Your true wealth in real estate comes from the appreciating nature of real estate. But let's talk about cash flow. This is usually insignificant if you're using leverage, but it can add up with multiple doors or multiple units. Ultimately, cash flow is not going to make you rich. This is a huge myth, and this is what all the gurus are trying to sell you right now, is cash flow makes you rich. That's not true. It's never going to be true. Really, the only way you get wealthy in real estate is by owning it for a long period of time. And then buying equity. This is probably my favorite part of real estate investing, and this is what separates the real investors from the amateur investors. Essentially, there has to be margin when you buy that after you can repair it and then sell it or refinance it, that you've increased your net worth. You've stair-stepped your net worth. So what I mean by this is, say you go buy a house and that house is being listed for $200,000, but you're able to buy it for $175,000. Let's say the appraisal came in at $200,000. Well, when you bought the property, you just increased your net worth by $25,000. That difference between what the property was worth at the time and what you paid for it. So you just increased your net worth by $25,000. You have $25,000 in equity. But what happens if that property was a dump? And even though it was a dump, it was still worth $200,000. But you're able to put another $50,000 into it, and now that same property is worth $250,000. Or let's say, that's a bad example. Maybe it's worth $300,000 after $50,000 put into it. So you made money on the purchase, on the buy, by $25,000, and then you put in $50,000, and you got another $50,000 back in the form of equity. So you're all into this property, $225, but it's now worth $300,000. You've just increased your net worth by $75,000. That's the crux of real estate investing. And then tax benefits. Tax benefits are great in investment real estate. So depreciation plus expenses plus debt is usually going to be greater than your income. So what does this mean? This means that your cash flow is typically not taxable. IRS Section 1031, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, huge tax advantage for real estate investors and really real estate investors only. Opportunity zones are probably the best tax cheat code out there, and they're highly, I don't think we're talking about them enough, but opportunity zones, for our clients who have significant capital gains and just want to buy a property and then see that grow over the next 10 years and then sell it for tax-free without depreciation recapture, that's huge. So we'll talk about the opportunity zones in a little bit. And then real estate professional status. Real estate professional status is something that a lot of agents don't know about. And it is like the number one reason why you, as a full-time real estate agent, want to own investment real estate. So here's what the IRS says. There's a few tests. There's the 50% test, there's a 750-hour test, and then there's a material participation test. And if you meet these three tests and you own investment real estate, or if you just meet these three tests and you're part of one of the 9 real estate professions that are listed here on the screen, keyword here is brokerage. We're engaged in real estate brokerage. So from the IRS's perspective, we would be considered a real estate professional status if we do this full-time as our job. Talk to your CPA, obviously. But what's the so what of real estate professional status? It's that as full-time agents, we become exempt from passive activity loss limits. which is huge. Absolutely huge. That means that essentially we have two buckets over here, right? We have, we'll call this our Schedule C, or we'll actually just call it our active bucket, okay? We'll call this our active bucket. And we have our passive bucket, right? So for the everyday person, you can't mix your passive and your active buckets. What I mean by these buckets, this is what's reported on your IRS tax return. So this would be your Schedule E in the passive side. The active would be your Schedule C, your Form 1040, where you report your W-2 wages and stuff. All that would fall into active. So you're gonna have your 1099 in here. You're going to have W-2. You're going to have active losses. So this is why if you own your own business, like real estate agents would, you can deduct marketing expenses because that's an active activity from your Schedule C, and you can offset your income up to what the IRS says, ordinary and reasonable for the conduct of your business. But I'm not a CPA, but so that's your active. Passive over here would be rental real estate. And there's some other stuff like stock dividends and everything, but that doesn't matter here. Why this is so important is because you cannot mix these, right? You cannot say, I have all this income, you're going to say net income over here. And then if you do rental real estate right, because you take advantage of the interest expenses, the other expenses that you have on top of depreciation, then you're usually operating at a net loss. And that's why a lot of investors, they don't pay the proverbial taxes on real estate, on investment real estate, is because they're usually always showing this paper loss. Well, the great thing about real estate professional status is, and because say you're in a real estate investor, your client's a real estate investor, and they have a W-2, or they're full-time employed, something outside of one of these 9 real estate industries, they can't take this net loss and go offset it against their W-2 income. They can't do it. It's not allowed. Up to a certain point. There's passive activity loss limits, but once you start making enough money, then you're not able to do that at all. Real estate agents, we're exempt from any cap on passive activity loss. So what we can do then is we can take our passive loss over here and offset our net income over here. It's huge. And so let's say we owe $100,000 in, or say we make $100,000 as a real estate agent in this year, and then we want to, but we have a rental property that we buy the same year, and we maybe accelerate some of the depreciation. We take advantage of bonus depreciation that the government's giving right now, and we find some other passive losses. Maybe there's starving expenses to once you list it as a rental, there's other expenses. Let's say we're made $100,000 on our commissions and our realtor income, our 1099, but on the passive side, we had a $50,000 loss. Well, because we're real estate professional status, we can take that $50,000 loss, offset it against that $100,000 income, and now we only pay taxes on $50,000. That's huge. That's a great thing about real estate professional status. Let's talk about some basic investing terminology. This is terminology that you need to have. You need to be able to be conversational about with your investors, or if you're just looking to invest yourself. You need to know what ARV is. ARV stands for after repair value. So that's, let's say you get marketed, or they're marketing a property that says they list it for $300,000. They say the ARV is $400,000. That means after it's fixed up to modern standards with modern finishes, your ARV is going to be, say $400,000. That's how that would be used in conversation. Hard money. Hard money is an alternative to a traditional loan. It has high fees and high interest rates, but this is a great way for investors to just have the funds to purchase a property. It's usually through a formalized hard money lender that advertises to the public. Private money is an alternative to a traditional loan as well. It does have higher fees and interest rates, typically, but it has more flexible terms. The difference between a hard money lender and a private money lender is private money is, they're not going out there and advertising that they lend money. Hard money lenders do. Hard money lenders, that's their primary job. The private money lender is usually not their primary job, is not to lend money. They might be a dentist, or they might be your mom. Anybody could be a private money lender. So that's really the difference. But you might be asking, why do we have hard money and private money? Why don't we just go get a loan? Well, there's some people who can't qualify for a loan. There's sometimes loans don't, there's no sense in getting a 30-year fixed rate mortgage if you're going to refinance it, or if you're going to go flip the property or something. Hard money and private money, I want to emphasize this though. Hard money and private money typically are very short-term solutions. They are short-term solutions. They're meant to be refinanced out of, at the 6-month point or the 12-month point, maybe the 18-month point. But very, very rarely will they be held longer than that, just because the interest rates are exorbitant and there's usually balloons. Wholesale. So wholesaling is when you sell a contract to purchase a property. It's also called an assignment. So the gist with wholesaling is you have individuals going out there, they're talking to individual owners, and they're saying, hey, I have a cash buyer, I'll give you $100,000 cash for your house, I'll close in 30 days. And the seller's like, okay, yeah, I think my house and usually wholesale deals, they usually find properties that are seriously distressed, and they're not going to qualify. They're oftentimes not going to qualify for any sort of traditional conventional financing. So they have this $100,000 house under contract that they're going to buy in cash. The only catch is they don't have $100,000 cash. So they go and they advertise it to what they call their buyers list, their network. They send emails, they blast on social media. I believe in South Carolina they changed the law last year that requires at least one person in the wholesalers organization to be a licensed real estate agent. I'm not sure on that, don't quote me. But other states, it's a free-for-all. You don't have any licensing requirements for wholesalers. So anyway, they'll turn around, they'll try to sell that contract for $110,000. The seller gets $100,000, the wholesaler gets $10,000, and the buyer gets a $110,000 property that he can then fix up and then flip for $180,000. So, there is a place, there is a niche in the real estate industry for wholesalers. Don't listen to some agents who are like, wholesalers bad, evil. I mean, wholesalers usually have just as good of a value proposition, and they tend to be the wholesalers I know can usually the average wholesaler can usually run laps around the average agent when it comes to investing and investing them out. Now, you do have to be cautious because wholesalers will usually they play with numbers. BRRRR, this is a very common term you're going to hear. It's just it's investing 101 that's just been bundled up into this nice acronym called BRRRR. This has been around forever, but the term BRRRR was recently coined by Brandon Turner of Bigger Pockets. It stands for Buy, Rehab, Rent, Refinance, Repeat. It's the basic process for acquiring investment real estate. And then depreciation. Depreciation is the idea that an asset will fall apart over time. So in investing, rental real estate is an asset. And that asset, it does fall apart. Over time, the floors break, the roof breaks, the walls get scuffed and damaged. So, everything in the home has a different lifespan. The foundation don't quote me on this, but just hypothetically, that foundation might be a 100-year life, the roof might have a 30-year life, the fence might have a 10-year life, the countertops might have a 15-year life, the carpet might have a 5-year life, the walls might have a 10-year life. So all of that, there's a whole bunch of different pieces that make up this one thing. And so the IRS says you can depreciate the cost basis of the improvement. So essentially the house minus the land, you can't depreciate land, for 27 and a half years. So let's say, for instance, you bought a house, that house was worth $400,000, but the land itself was worth $100,000, so the house was actually a $300,000 house. Well, $300,000 divided by 27.5 is just under $11,000. So that's $11,000 of loss that you can take every single year for 27 and a half years. And commercial property is 39 years. All right, so how do we calculate a real estate deal? Well, there's a few ways, a few rules of thumb, but we'll touch briefly on these. First off is the 1% rule. This is something very common that you hear thrown around, the 1% rule. Does it mean the 1% rule? 1% rule just means that 1% of the purchase price is paid in rent each month. So for instance, if you were to find a $200,000 house here in Charleston, and then you put a tenant in there who's paying you $2,000 a month, that would meet the 1% rule. This is a really bad metric though. It's usually not met in many markets, especially markets like Charleston that skew appreciation over cash flow. But the underlying principle can be used to quickly underwrite a deal. Like the idea is, hey, rents in this neighborhood go for $2,500 and the houses are $400,000, and then all of a sudden you see, a house pop up for $300,000. Well, you know that that's probably gonna be closer to the 1% rule than all the other homes. It might be worth investigating why. But the 1% rule is actually found in a lot of markets in the United States, especially in the Midwest, maybe some upstate markets as well. But keep in mind, those are areas. The reason why the 1% rule works is because these are, areas of low wage growth, low population growth, usually negative population growth, to be honest. The peak of those areas were decades ago, and the homes there are just so cheap. But even though the homes are cheap, people still can't afford them, and so you might be able to go find a $50,000 home in Ohio, and then put a tenant in there for $1,000 a month. Well, now all of a sudden you not only met the 1% rule, you met the 2% rule. All right, so next up, I want to talk about cash-on-cash return. So cash-on-cash return is most commonly used by investors for single-family or 2 to 4 multifamily homes. The idea is you have certain monthly income, you have monthly expenses, you have to account for other factors like vacancy and maintenance. But essentially, what that does is cash-on-cash return gives you essentially return on your initial investment at that year. And so what I like to do is I actually have a cash-on-cash calculator. And so let's use that one really fast here. So everything in the purple that you can see is actually something that you can change. So let's say we're trying to underwrite a deal, and we say, okay, that they're asking, say, $300,000 for this home, and we know rents in the area are going to be anywhere between $1,900 and $2,200, or maybe $2,300. Let's call it $2,300 in this case. How do we get that number? Well, we have Rentometer. Rentometer is a phenomenal tool. In fact, let me show you Rentometer really fast. So sometimes you might be asking yourself, like, how do I know what homes are going to rent for? Well, I actually have a pro membership to Rentometer. It's a great resource, and yeah, it's a phenomenal resource. It enables you to do your own custom branding too, if you have the pro account. So let's just do a random address. I'm gonna do. Oh, thanks. Thank you for letting me know. But anyway, I went to Rent-A-Meter. I typed in 342 Feldspar Lane, and the reason I did that is because, this is just a neighborhood in Ladson. And one thing that you gotta emphasize with your investors, and when we're underwriting a deal, evaluating whether or not this is a good deal or a bad deal, is what value add opportunities are there. The easiest value add opportunity, in my opinion, besides basic cosmetic upgrades like new floor, new paint, is the addition of a bedroom from a flex space. So to say there's a dining room, there's a loft, there's an office. Can you create another bedroom? Because when it comes down to it, the thing that matters most in how much you're going to be able to get in rent for a particular home is how many bedrooms you have. It doesn't matter. Bedroom count matters like the most, and then there's like space, and then square footage and bathroom count matters after that. So I know this particular home. Let's say it's a 5-bedroom home, and it's over 1.5 baths. So the great thing about Rent-A-Meter is this report is going to tell you exactly how much you're going to be able to get in rent based on comparables, and they're going to give you a range. So in this case, the average is 2,575. Median is going to be around that, but then you have the 24th percentile and 75th percentile. So if you're to stay between the 25th and the 75th percentiles, you're probably safe. So let's just call it $2,500, $2,600. But anyway, going back to our cash on cash calculator, let's just say we were able to get this home for, if I can find my cursor, there it is. All right, so say we're able to get this home under contract for $385,000. Or they're asking $385,000 for it. But we know that between the 25th and 75th percentile, it's $2,400 a month all the way up to, let's call it $2,800 a month. So we'll call it $2,400, $2,500, $2,550, $2,600, $2,700, $2,750. Okay? And then we need to come over here on this side, and we need to figure out what our down payment's going to be. Because remember, cash on cash is just that return on investment, an ROI, if you will. So the down payment is what's going to, essentially, that's going to be the biggest cost of our investment, is that down payment. How much money can we get into the house? So let's just say it's investment property, so 20% down. Closing cost of 3%. Let's say our interest rate, say this was a new construction home and the builder gave us a 5% interest rate as an incentive to buy the home. Let's just say it's a new home, so no maintenance expense, but we'll just account for 10% vacancy, and we don't have any repairs, and property management is $1,300 or 13%. So if we were to put a 20% down payment, now all of a sudden our cash on cash return, if you can see it, it's actually 7.42%, which, if a good cash on cash return, like something as a baseline, should usually start around 8%, because you can usually, if you look back at the history of the U.S. stock market and like the S&P 500, over the long term, it's usually resulted in an 8% annualized return. So that's usually the metric I use. The metric I know a lot of other investors use is that 8% annualized return, the 8% cash on cash return. So while this could be a deal, it would be dependent on the interest rate. It would be dependent on what you get in rent. If you're able to get this the top of rent. But the great thing about this calculator and why I like to use it is, well, let's talk about when does it make sense, right? So let's say we were able to get the house for $375,000 instead of $385,000. Well, now you have an 8. Now it's looking a little better. What if you're able to get this? Maybe the builder was trying to just get rid of the home, like clear their inventory. Now it's $365,000. Let's say instead of a rental property, let's say this was a primary home that you're going to live in for a year and then rent it out after 1 year. Well, let's say you only put 5% down. In that case, now your cash-on-cash return, it goes up a little bit. It doesn't go up too much because you would have a larger loan in that case. But anyway, that's what cash-on-cash return does is it takes into account vacancy and maintenance, and it will give you essentially a annualized return on the investment you put in. So this is a metric that a lot of investors like to use. Okay. Cap rate. Cap rate is almost always used on commercial properties. Cap rate, this is the equation for cap rate. It's just your NOI, net operating income, divided by the acquisition price. Net operating income does not take into account debt. So you have this net operating income, and then you have to pay your debt. So when I say debt, your debt obligation, that's your mortgage, essentially. Cap rate indicates how much a property will make, and it's actually also how properties are valued. So commercial property is not really based on comparable sales approach like we're used to in residential real estate. Commercial properties are based on cap rates and valuations from how much income that property can produce. So with elevated interest rates right now, when we had these like crazy 2% interest rates in the pandemic, we were saying people buying 3 and 4 caps. But when interest rates go up, we're going to have a cap rate expansion, and our cap rate now, a good cap rate would be like 6, 7, 8% for a large commercial property. Internal rate of return is a typical metric that's used by commercial investors and real estate syndications. This account, so keep it in mind, cash-on-cash return, what that did was it took your initial investment and said, what is your cash flow going to make? Or what is your cash flow going to give you in your return on investment? It's really not a great metric though, because cash-on-cash return doesn't take into account the equity that you get from buying the home. It doesn't take into account the tax benefits. Doesn't take into account the amortization and that the principal pay down. There's so many things that cash-on-cash return does not do that internal rate of return does. And that's why I know I said it earlier. I think cash flow is a myth. Cash flow is great. It's what the gurus are going to sell you online, but cash flow isn't going to make you life-changing money. And to be honest, there's some investors who will walk away from a deal because it doesn't cash flow. But that deal would have, if they purchased it, would have stair-stepped their net worth by $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 in equity. How many years of getting $200 a month but they would have bought it if they got $200 a month in cash flow. Well, how many years of owning that piece of investment real estate would it have taken for you to get $50,000 from that $200 a month in cash flow? That's like 25 years, almost 20 years. So 20 years of cash flow, or they can just buy the deal and stair-step their net worth, get that equity. In my opinion, that's how you should invest. It's not based on cash flow. It's based on buying this equity and then growing your net worth and essentially having a little piggy bank that you can smash when you need to. Also, principal paydown will usually offset that cash flow if you can see it that way. Like if you're not cash flowing at all, or if you're cash flowing negative $50 a month, but it was a great deal, a great buy, a great location, you increase your net worth, but you're losing $600 a year because it's not cash flowing, but you're paying down $300 a month in principal. Well, your net worth is still increasing. You're not losing money on that property. It's just going into an illiquid form. So all these things are things to consider when we're talking about metrics for buying rental real estate. All right, so buying a property. I want to touch on the acquisition, the financing, and the exit strategy of buying your first rental property. So acquisition. One thing I want to point out is buying the right deal is the first rule of investing. There is no other rule number one. The number one rule of investing is buying the right deal, finding and buying the right deal. There are opportunities on market. You need to be able to recognize really the three types of distress, because distress will create deals. When there's no distress, there's no deal. So distress equals deal. There's really three types of distress. There's personal distress. So the home's going into foreclosure, the individual's potentially lost their job. You come in and you save that individual from a terrible situation. Market distress. So think of 2008 financial collapse. There's a market distress there. And then you have property distress. There's some owners who just let it go abandoned, or it sits vacant forever. They're absentee owners. They don't care about the property, and now they have this huge headache of a property that they're just trying to offload. So there are all the three of those opportunities on the market. Just last night, I saw on the MLS that it was written in the public description that home is going into foreclosure tomorrow. We need a contract today in order to prevent that foreclosure from going through. And so I think they actually got a contract. But there were there's tons of opportunities on market. All the deals that I personally bought have been on market deals. And what I've kind of found my niche on market is distressed tenant-occupied properties. The reason why is because a lot of full-time investors or flippers, they don't want tenant-occupied properties because they have hard money. They need to go in, they need to renovate, they need to and execute their exit strategy quickly. So typical investors aren't going to go buy these tenant-occupied homes, and then a primary homeowner. 85% of homeowners or home shoppers are wanting to buy a home for themselves to live in. Only 15% are investors. So that's just something to keep in mind. And obviously, primary homeowners aren't going to go buy a tenant-occupied property usually. So there are a lot of on-market opportunities, especially if it's if you're just a investor who you can take your time to wait for your tenant's lease to expire, because tenants' rights obviously convey. If you can wait for your tenant's lease to expire, or you can offer them cash for keys. I've done both, and you can get them out of the property in order to renovate it, bring the rents up to market, and execute your exit strategy. Wholesalers does require you to network. Even the best wholesalers will underestimate the repairs, and they'll always inflate the after repair value. So you really have to know how to underwrite deals yourself. You have to have good contractors, good relationships, because these properties that the wholesalers are bringing you are usually more distressed than on-market opportunities. And like I said, it requires you to network. You need to get on these buyers lists. I get emails probably 2 to 5 a day from wholesalers in South Carolina of off-market opportunities. I get so many off-market opportunities every single day, all around the state of South Carolina. Some in Georgia too. But one thing about wholesalers is they typically will not allow for financing. They want cash or hard money. And then you can find deals yourself. Community network, the same way we generate leads as real estate agents, you have wholesalers going out there generating leads for, wholesaling. Why can't we do the same? Why can't we generate our own leads for buying properties for ourselves? I'm not saying wholesaling, but buying properties for ourselves. So networking in the community, driving for dollars, which is essentially go around, write down addresses of distressed properties you see, then try to contact those owners through skip tracing. You own your own lead generation for opportunities off market. Great ways to find investment real estate out there. All right, so financing. Financing is the biggest thing that you need to be concerned about when you're buying your first investment property, and making sure that your clients qualify for their investment properties too. Financing for investment properties is incredibly difficult because there's a lot more pieces at play here than just a primary home purchase. right? Now your debt to income ratio is probably going to be a concern because of a primary home purchase if you're, because the primary home that you have as a homeowner. And then, debt to income might be a concern, especially when you start getting up there. And even then, even for the small time investors, you get actually capped out on the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loans that you're actually able to have. So, everybody has a cap with conventional conforming loans. If you can qualify for them, go for it. Like that you absolutely want to go this route if you can swing it. And not many people can. And so that's why they're the hardest to qualify for. But they're also, if you take it like a step, like a bird's eye view of the economy and the mortgage industry in general, these are the safest for banks and financial institutions. So that's why they have some of the best terms and interest rates. You cannot buy a 1 to 4 unit property under an LLC with a conventional loan. You have to use your personal name to buy that home, and then you can just quick claim it into the LLC after you buy it. But your name's going to be on the public record because of that. I have heard of some local credit unions or banks like waiving this requirement, but I believe it's a actual statutory guideline. So that's definitely something to consider. You can't buy these in an LLC. You have to quick claim afterwards. But the whole point of buying it in an LLC anyway is for asset protection and doesn't actually give you any benefits. So don't worry about that too much. A lot of people will go buy their first investment property or a fix and flip or a traditional BRRRR rental with hard money, private money, or some line of credit. I want to emphasize this. A HELOC, a line of credit, hard money, private money, this is short-term debt. This should never be used as a long-term solution. The long-term solution should always be refinancing it into some 15, 30-year fixed-rate mortgage or some commercial product that has more favorable terms to you. Even if it is a adjustable rate mortgage or some mortgage that has a balloon. HELOCs is private money and hard money is short-term debt. Why? Because typically they are going to have the highest interest rates. It doesn't make sense to have you don't want to be 100% leveraged on a property. If you went to go buy, say for instance, you wanted a 20% down payment, you wouldn't use your 20% down payment, you wouldn't get that from a HELOC at a 12% interest rate, then you go buy an investment property at an 8% interest rate, now you're 100% leverage, and it doesn't set you up for success. So when we talk about financing, it should really come, if you're going to go the hard money, private money, or the HELOC route, that should really be a short-term solution. DSCR, who's heard of DSCR? DSCR, yeah. So debt service coverage ratio, great loan products out there, and it's a great option when either your personal income, your credit is too low to qualify for a conventional loan, or other people that are capped out on their Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loans. So a couple concerns there with that, with DSCR, is it's not a conventional conforming loan, right? It's held by the institution that sells it. It's going to be a higher interest rate. There's going to be a prepayment penalty as well. DSCR loans are great for those who need a loan, need to buy the property, whatever solution that is, for whatever term that is. But keep in mind that if you're going to purchase a home with a debt service coverage ratio loan, you're going to need to hold on to that property, and it's not going to make a lot of financial sense for you to refinance that within a certain time metric because of the pretty steep prepayment penalty. So for instance, I was looking at DSCR loans earlier this year, and I got quoted the ones that had some of the best terms were a 5.4321 prepayment penalty. So if I refinance in the first year, that's a 5% of the loan amount as a prepayment penalty. If I refinance in the second year, 4% of the loan amount as a prepayment penalty. In the third year, 3% of the loan amount and the prepayment penalty. So DSCR loans are great because they don't consider your personal income credit, but they do have pretty steep prepayment penalties, and especially in an era of elevated rates, when a lot of financial institutions are saying that interest rates are going to come down next year. It might not be great to get locked up into a 9% interest rate in 2023 when you can't refinance it unless you take a steep hit until 2027 or 2028. So subject to it's not a new concept. It is a concept though that has really come into notoriety in this past year, probably a year and a half. The Pace Morby crowd, if you will, has come out in full force. These gurus out there telling you like go buy subject to, go buy subject to. Well, and this is my personal opinion on subject to financing. I mean, it's great if you can make it work. However, I think that subject to disaligns with the fundamentals of real estate investing. The fundamentals of real estate investing is you buy a home or a property under what market value is, you raise that property to market value by putting less money than it takes for that difference, right? So you buy a $400,000 home for $300,000, put $50,000 into it, you just create $50,000 in equity. That buying equity is the fundamental of real estate investing, right? Subject to is all about leverage. How can we leverage the most money possible at a lower interest rate? How can we go, so instead of targeting properties that are in distress and using equity to build equity, people who do subject to tend to go as much leverage as possible, and they're not buying a property because it's in distress and they see a value add opportunity. They are buying a property because it has a great interest rate. They're buying an interest rate, and the acquisition cost is low, so they're betting on long-term appreciation with that lower interest rate and cash flow to cover the difference. And that's great, and at 14-year period in U.S. history, like I said earlier, real estate's never lost value. But in a lot of ways, I do think subject to is a little speculative because you're banking on that long-term appreciation because you're going all in, you're high leverage, buying homes at market value. I just think how subject to has taken over in 2023 has kind of disengaged from the fundamentals of real estate investing, and I personally don't recommend it. All right, keynote here. You got to figure out the financing piece before you submit your offer. Make sure the property will qualify for a refinance. You do not want to go buy a property with a hard money loan only to find out after you do the remodel, the rehab, that you can't qualify for some other conventional financing and you're screwed, right? So it is imperative that you understand the refinance piece before you even buy the home, right? Knowing how you're going to acquire the property is one thing, but knowing your exit strategy is a completely different thing. And you have to know that refinance piece, otherwise you're going to be the one, you're going to be the one without the, when the music stops, you're going to be the one without the seat, and you could, suffer pretty substantially. So what I mean by that is go find, go talk to a bank, go talk to a loan officer that you trust. Make sure you have your clients do this if they are going to purchase a property with hard money, private money, or a HELOC, and make sure that on the back end they will qualify for that. They will qualify for that refinance. And also keep in mind, this year Freddie Mac released new guidance on title seasoning policies for cash out refinance. So traditionally it was 6 months. 6 months title seasoning before you could do a cash out refinance. They upped that to a year this year. So for instance, you buy a home in let's just say May 2023. You can't do a cash out refinance until May of 2024 in that case, because of the Freddie Mac requirements. Now Fannie Mae, I believe they haven't followed suit yet, but most lenders are now requiring that 12 months anyway. So you'll need to find you'll either need to find, if you need to do a cash out refinance within that first year, you're probably going to need to find some local bank or credit union that can do it, because most conventional products will not. All right, so exit strategy, and a key thing with the exit strategy piece, you need to have more than one exit strategy. So a lot of investors, and I think the fundamental of investing is buy and hold, right? Buy and hold as a long-term rental. So when we say buy and hold, you're going to buy a property and you're going to hold on to it as a rental property. Let the tenants pay for the debt obligation, pay for the expenses, and whatever difference you have left over is cash flow with taking advantage of all those other benefits of owning real estate. There's a couple things that we can do though with a long-term rental. That's the beauty of real estate investing, is there is a lot of things that you can do with a property to maximize the cash flow or minimize your headache. It all depends on where you are in your life and where you are in your investing journey. So we can have long-term rentals. So long-term rentals, it could just be a traditional long-term rental. You know, you put tenants in there on a year-long lease, and they pay you rent every month. They pay for utilities typically, and you call it good. Another way to maximize the profit in your investment is a rent by the room strategy. So I actually do this in one of my investment properties. It's a 5-bedroom house in like some random suburb in Goose Creek, and what I do is I put tenants in, or I essentially put keypad locks on all the doors. I furnish a common area. There's an extensive list of house rules and regulations that the tenants have to abide by. Very strict in the screening requirements, and that's a great way to maximize cash flow. So now a home that would have otherwise rented for $2,200 a month now rents for $3,800 a month. You know, granted, I do have a lot more expenses. I pay for utilities. There's lawn care. There's professional cleaning. I come in every single month to make sure that home is professionally cleaned. So you know, there are more expenses, but it is a great way to maximize cash flow. And then Section 8. Section 8 is a great opportunity to maximize cash flow too. When we talk about Section 8, everybody understand who's not aware of Section 8 housing? Okay, so it's a government housing voucher program. And essentially the idea there is the government's gonna come in and subsidize or completely offset a individual's housing payments. And so there's a couple extra steps to get your home Section 8 qualified, but at the end of the day, it's not too difficult. And Section 8 is great because what that does is they call them fair market rents, and there's small area fair market rents which are by zip code and by county. And so when you take a look at, say, the Berkeley County fair market rents, you have a home out in St. Stephen's, like a 4-bedroom home in St. Stephen's, that rents almost as much as a 4-bedroom home in Goose Creek because it's all based on the county and the location. But the difference between St. Stephen's and Goose Creek, obviously, is the 4-bedroom in St. Stephen's is going to be half the price as the 4-bedroom in Goose Creek. So it's a great opportunity for those buy and hold investors if you want to just put tenants in there that are, you know, getting some of their housing covered by the government. Midterm rentals are actually taking off. A lot of great things about midterm rentals. So a midterm rental is literally the middle ground between a short-term rental and a long-term rental. So a short-term rental obviously is between 1 to 30 days. A long-term rental is, you know, your traditional longer rental. But there's a middle ground, and there's a huge demand for this middle ground for housing for traveling professionals, corporate housing, travel nurses, transient families, folks displaced because of a disaster in their house and their insurance company is looking for temporary housing for them. There's a lot of options out there. And so the midterm rental space has definitely taken off. The great thing about midterm rental is you're usually going to make a lot more money as a midterm rental compared to a long-term rental. It's going to be a little bit more, headache and work on your end. and the way to get tenants is a little different than a long-term rental or even a short-term rental. Not all properties are great midterm rental opportunities, but some are. I personally do a midterm rental in West Ashley. I rent out a studio apartment. Actually, it's a one-bedroom apartment, a guest suite in my house that's completely separate from my own living area to travel nurses, and it completely offsets, or it more or less offsets a lot of my my mortgage payment there. But the midterm rental has been synonymous with travel nurses for a long time. It's kind of changing that, but it's a great way to get around a lot of municipal regulations and municipal law, and it could be a good strategy for you. And short-term rental, obviously, short-term rental is Airbnb, the Verbos, Booking.com, your online booking agencies. I personally have 2 short-term rentals here in the Charleston area. They both perform exceptionally well, and it's usually going to be the most cash flow per month. It's also going to be the most work. And then another buy and hold or long-term rental type, and this is kind of a niche one, is called group housing. So think of sober homes or assisted living. There's actually people who are crushing it in this space because there's a lot of demand for this, but it's so niche that there's not a lot of supply. So there's some people who are absolutely crushing it. And the great thing about like assisted living facilities, like those are like state protected. Like there's state and federal law that protects these establishments. And so if some HOA or some city came in and said you can't do this in this suburban neighborhood, there's a good chance that they're not compliant with the law. So another great way to maximize your cash flow as a long-term rental. Again, the reason why I give you all of these options here is because this traditional long-term rental, that's just one of so many options out there for you to maximize your cash flow, especially in an era of elevated interest rates where cash flow is hard to come by. It's really not, and I know that's a hot take, but cash flow is not that hard to come by if you consider the full array of things that you can do with a rental property. A traditional long-term rental is like, oh no, the property won't cash flow. It's losing me $200 a month as a long-term rental. Well, yeah, that's because you're doing a traditional long-term rental, right? You have all these other options that you can do if you really want to maximize your cash flow. Now, each one has its pros and cons, and maybe none of the others make sense for your situation. For instance, like rent by the room. There's not going to be a property manager out there who's going to touch rent by the room. There's not going to be a property manager out there who's going to touch midterm rentals just because it's more work, more hassle. But if you have the ability to do DIY property management, then all these are on the table for you. And then you can do some sort of hybrid. So hybrid as in, say, you're a short-term rental in the on-season, then a midterm rental in the off-season. I personally do that with one of my short-term rentals. It becomes a midterm rental in the off-season. You can flip the home. If you underestimated the rehab budget and the property's not going to cash flow, the exit strategy makes sense for you to just flip it, then flip it. I don't think flippers are investors. Flippers are not investors. And the IRS doesn't actually think that people who flip homes are investors either, because keep in mind that when you sell a flip, you're paying short-term capital gains, which is taxed at the ordinary income tax level. So flippers are just another occupation. They are in the business of buying and selling homes for themselves. They're not in investing. And you talk to some of the more seasoned flippers, more seasoned pros out there, and each one's gonna tell you is like, when I got started early in my career, I just wish I held on to like one out of every 5 or 10 of my flips, right? Because true wealth in real estate is not made by flipping houses. It's made by buying and owning homes for the long term. Flipping is not investing. Again, you're subject to that ordinary income tax. And what flipping does have, so one of the pros of flipping is it's a cash infusion vehicle, but you're not going to build that long-term wealth. So what I mean by that is, a lot of real estate investors have a capital problem. That's the problem with real estate investing is, you got to have money for it. And so maybe your first few deals are flips to get that cash infusion to build your business out. But again, long term, you want to be a buy and hold. You don't want to be a flipper. Last one I want to talk about is wholesale. So wholesale is a word that was coined pretty recently, I think. But it's essentially wholesaling combined with retail selling. So the idea there is, instead of you wholesaling a deal, say you go in, you buy a property, you might even buy it from a wholesaler, but instead of fixing and flipping it, you sell the property. So maybe that's the exit strategy that makes sense for you. Maybe you don't have the expertise or the experience or the capital to take on a flip that you just bought, but you know somebody else who does, so just sell it to that person. The difference between wholesaling and wholesaling is that in wholesaling, you actually own the property and you're selling the property, you're not trying to assign a contract. All right, so I want to move on to property management. So property management is always something you have to consider when you're looking to buy investment real estate. Either you're going to manage the property or you're going to pay somebody else to manage the property. It's not as simple as that, though. Depending on what your rental strategy is, you might not be able to find property management, and they can be wildly different. So if we're talking a traditional long-term rental, professional property management companies out there are going to charge you anywhere from 8 to 12% of the monthly gross rent. And then they're going to charge you additional fees to place a tenant, to inspect the home, and for any maintenance that needs to be done. Here's my beef with property management companies is their priorities don't necessarily align with yours as a homeowner or for your investor clients. And here's what I mean by that. Property management companies make money when there's turnover, because when they place a tenant, they keep anywhere from 20 to 50%. I've seen sometimes 100% of the first month's rent just to place the tenant. So there's one month of cash flow gone, or multiple months of cash flow gone. Then say something breaks, say the water heater goes out. Well, they're going to use their preferred vendors. They're not going to allow you to go out and choose a vendor for your property. They're going to pick their own. That company's going to come out, they're going to do the work, and then the property management company is going to bill you. But the plumber probably bill the property management company a little bit less. So they take the difference, and it's usually written in all these contracts. So ideally, you as a homeowner or as an investor, you get a tenant in there for 24, 36, Lord forbid 48 months. That's what you want. You just want an easygoing, long-term tenant. But the property management company, they make a lot more money when there's turnover and things break. Not saying that all are disreputable. There's some great property management companies out there who do have your best interests aligned. But just like everything, whether it's picking a real estate agent or finding the right deal, you have to do your due diligence when it comes to picking the right property management company for you. And this is only for long-term rental, by the way. Property management companies typically don't touch rent by the room. They don't touch mid-term rental. There are short-term rental property management companies. They're going to do a lot more than 8 to 12%. The entering argument is that short-term rentals are going to be a whole lot more work-intensive than a long-term rental. So we're talking 20 or 30% of gross just to manage the short-term rental. Now, like you guys know, South Carolina is one of the few states where property managers must be licensed similar to an agent and work under a property management in charge. Now, that does not actually apply to your own homes that you own as an investor yourself, right? It's just if you're trying to manage somebody else's property and you're taking compensation from that, to my understanding of the law, you need to be licensed or work under a licensed property manager in charge. DIY property management is recommended if you're starting out. So there's a lot of online software out there to make this a lot more manageable and actually makes you look professional. So I've heard horror stories of landlords out there requiring their tenants to like Venmo the landlord, and there's not even a lease in place, and this is how you get screwed as an investor. Is you don't approach the investment from a business standpoint. You don't have professional leases. You don't have professional software to manage your leases. You don't have a professional software to collect payments or to set up maintenance requests. So there's a lot of property management softwares out there. My favorite is Avail.co. That's just my personal preference. That's what I use to manage 10 rentals. It's $5 per month per unit. So with the units I do have under Avail, it's like $45 a month. Well worth it. I don't have any problems with Avail. Yeah. So next topic I want to go through is what we call house hacking. As a show of hands, anybody familiar with house hacking? House hacking? Yeah, exactly. So it is a great strategy, and this is how I tell my investor clients, and this is actually how I got started in real estate, is house hacking is the easiest and the safest entry point into real estate ownership. So here's the basics. You rent out portions of your own personal residence in order to subsidize or completely offset the mortgage payment. So we do that by getting roommates, or maybe we buy a home that has a ADU, accessory dwelling unit, and we rent out that accessory dwelling unit either as a long, short, or midterm rental. And then you could find a 2 to 4 unit multifamily home. The reason why I say 2 to 4 units is because HUD has said up to 4 units is considered residential. So you can go get a conventional or FHA loan, or whatever conforming loan product for a multifamily home. Now the problem with 2 to 4 unit multifamily in the Charleston MSA, Metropolitan Statistical Area, is that it doesn't really exist in any great quantities. City planning over the past 40, 50, 60 years has really put a damper on that 2 to 4 unit multifamily. We have large multifamily commercial developments, and we have single family homes. That was very intentional city planning, back starting in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. So there's kind of a shortage of the 2 to 4 unit multifamily. Now, as I'm sure you know, the 2 to 4 unit multifamily that we do have in the Charleston area, it's either $1 million plus downtown, or in some other areas, some very old areas of Charleston. So how can you scale with house hacking? Like I said, this is the easiest, the safest entry point into real estate. You still get all the home ownership advantages. You get the tax advantages of owning real estate. You get, but you now treat a percentage of everything as a business. You still get the tax advantages. You get the principal pay down. You get the long-term appreciation that real estate has. If you can buy equity at that that initial purchase and gives you some equity in the home, then you get that too. And so house hacking is a great strategy. You get all the advantages, but it's safe because people are paying for your mortgage, either partially or completely. I have a lot of clients who do this, a lot of military clients, and they come in, they buy a 4-bedroom house in a random area like Goose Creek or Latson or Somerville or Monk's Corner, and they get 2 or 3 other roommates, and those 2 or 3 other roommates are now paying for their mortgage while they live here. Then their plan is, in the long term, to rent out that home when they leave Charleston as a traditional long-term rental. But how can you scale with house hacking? So this is how a lot of people do it. They go and this is how people build a real estate portfolio in the safest, easiest way possible. Is you go and you buy a home and you house hack it. You get roommates but you just don't stop there. After a year of living there, you go and you buy another home, and you house hack that and transition the other one to either a long-term rental, midterm rental, or keep it as a rent by the room model. It's a great way to safely scale a portfolio. And every single year, the reason why I say every year is because it needs to be a year, otherwise it's mortgage fraud. But you go and you use those conventional conforming loans If you qualify for a government-backed loan, then use that. It's very little barrier to entry because it's like either 0, 3.5, 5% down payment, and you go and you buy another house. And now I subscribe to what David Green of Bigger Pockets says about house hacking and the type of homes that you want to buy. In my personal opinion, and this is how I advise my clients, is because the barrier of entry is so little in house hacking, and it's so safe because other people are paying your mortgage, so your debt obligation essentially goes away, or is partially subsidized. You want to buy in the nicest areas of town. You want to buy in the areas of town that have geographic constraints that are going to boost that long-term appreciation. You don't want to go out and you don't want to start buying, in the Charleston example, you don't want to go out and start buying house hacks out in Somerville, because they're going to be building out in Somerville for the next 50 years. You want to buy something like West Ashley, Mount Pleasant, the Peninsula. Hanahan is more or less fully built up. Goose Creek is almost more or less fully built up. Areas that have geographic constraints, where future new development isn't going to be present in any great quantities. And you want to go where people are moving to and where people want to live. People want to live close to the peninsula, close to the beaches. People want to live on James Island. People want to live in West Ashley. People don't necessarily, if they have a job closer to the peninsula, they don't want to be living out in Somerville or Moncks Corner, or anywhere near the Lake Marion or Lake Moultrie. So if you're going to scale with house hacking, go buy that home. Buy a home once a year. Maybe even a live and fix. Once a year, house hack it, transition it to a rental, go buy another home. And if you do that for the next 3 years, and you use that 5% down, or that 3.5% down FHA or 5% down conventional, and you continue to do this over the period of 3 to 5 years, you just acquired 3 to 5 properties that are now rentals. So it's a great strategy, and it is the safest barrier, or the safest entry point into real estate. You just have to be intentional with it, right? There's not everybody can do this. Not everybody has the family structure that can tolerate and move once a year. Not everybody has the means to move every year. So just keep that in mind. But if it's something that you want to do, it's a great way to build a portfolio with very little money, and all it takes is that long-term mindset. And my last point on house hacking is, here's the entering rule and the final rule of house hacking. What you're doing in house hacking is you're trading today's comfort for tomorrow's financial well-being, right? Living with roommates is uncomfortable. I currently house hack right now. I have a 2,400 square foot house in West Ashley that I converted 600 square feet to a completely separate ADU. It looks like a duplex from the street. It's an accessory dwelling unit. But I now rent that out to travel nurses on 1 to 3 month contracts, and it covers over half of my mortgage payment every single month. Now my house, instead of being 2,400 square feet, it's 1,700 square feet, and it feels cramped. It feels tiny. My wife isn't necessarily a fan of it, but you know what? We get it. We're trading today's comfort and having to share a home with somebody for tomorrow's well-being. That accessory dwelling unit in the past year and a half has multiple 5 figures of rental income, and so that's money that just stayed in the bank that otherwise would have gone to my mortgage payment. So we can now redeploy that money to other things. House hacking is a great entry point to real estate. And then the last topic I want to talk about is what we call, and you're gonna hear this a lot from your investor clients who have an inkling of real estate investing 101, or you know it yourself. I just want to go over it. This is not something new. This has just been repackaged into a nice acronym, but it's essentially called BRRRR. Stands for Buy, Rehab, Rent, Refinance, Repeat. It was coined by Bigger Pockets. I think Brandon Turner of Bigger Pockets back in 2015 coined the term BRRRR. This isn't new. This isn't something that's like innovative of the past decade. No, this is investing 101. It just now is in a nice acronym. So the idea here is you buy a property, you rehab that property, then you put a renter in that property, you refinance it to get your capital back out, and then you use that capital to go repeat it. So buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. So let me give you a basic example. Let's just say, hypothetically, we find a property, and let's just say this property, let's say the ARV is going to be $250,000. Say we know we can sell this property for $250,000. Actually, let's just call it $240,000 for simplicity's sake. We know all the other homes in the neighborhood are selling for the $240,000 range, so we're pretty confident we can sell this home for $240,000. Now, but we know it needs a lot of work. So let's say we can buy it. Let's just say the purchase price is $60,000. Right? That seems pretty cheap, right? $60,000 for a $240,000 home doesn't feel right. But what you don't know, and I do, is the repairs for this home is $120,000. So we have to put in over 6 figures into this home. So we're all in $180,000. So we're all in $180K. All in $180K, right? Not many people can do this. How did we get that 60 plus 120? We either had it in cash, we had it in hard money, we had it in a HELOC, we got a private money loan. A house like this certainly wouldn't qualify for conventional financing. So we're all in $180,000, right? But now we put a renter in there. So there's now a renter who's just hypothetically paying us, let's just say $2K per month, $2,000 per month in rent, okay? And now, what I want to go do is the last step. So I bought the property, I rehabbed the property, again I put that $120,000 into it, I put a renter in there who's now paying us $2,000 a month. Now I want to go do the refinance. I've said it before, I'll say it again, the refinance and the financing is the most important piece in this entire thing. So I go to a bank and I say, hey bank, this house is worth $240,000. I own it outright in cash, or you have a HELOC or something. But ideally, in this example, let's just say it's cash. And the bank's like, okay, great. We'll give you a loan at 75% loan to value. So we'll just say 75% LTV, right? And the bank says, okay, here is a check. We're going to give you a check at 75% loan to value, do a cash out refinance, and now now you have a mortgage on the property, but the bank cuts you a check for 75% of $240,000, which is $180K. So back to you. $180,000 goes back to you. And now you have that money, that's a refinance, that's not taxable, and you go and you repeat it. So you use that $180,000 to go buy another $60,000 house and put $120,000 into it. So let's recap. What did you just do here in the BRRRR? You bought a house, you added value to it, you refinanced it, and now you have a 25% equity stake in a house where you have a tenant who's completely paying your mortgage obligation. You have all that money back out to go reinvest. That is the fundamentals of real estate investing, is keep your capital moving and essentially try to leave as little money as possible in the deal to go redeploy that elsewhere. But having that equity stake, that 25% equity stake, that's what you just did. You just created 25% of the home's value in your net worth, right? And that $180,000 goes back to you, and you continue to invest. So that is the power of BRRRR. That is the power of real estate investing. All right, so I want to leave you with some final words. I really think that there are two sides of a spectrum. I know when we first got started today, we talked about the spectrum of Dave Ramsey versus Robert Kiyosaki. How comfortable are you with debt? How comfortable are you with leverage? You're going to fall some point on that spectrum. Now, I also want to talk about another spectrum. that is the appreciation versus cash flow spectrum. There's really two types of markets out there. There's cash flow markets and there's appreciating markets, or appreciation skewed markets. Typically, the true appreciation markets do not cash flow very well. And similarly, the cash flow markets don't appreciate very well. So take, for instance, the Midwest, and that's a cash flow market. You can go buy a $60,000 house in Ohio and rent it out for $1,000 a month, and it's going to cash flow like a proverbial cash cow, I guess. I don't know. But that $60,000 house in 10 years might only be worth whatever the inflation rate of those 10 years is, because there's no geographic constraint. There's really no population growth in a lot of these areas. It's going to remain relatively stagnant. Now, appreciating markets, think Austin, Texas, San Francisco, San Diego, Boise, Idaho. A lot of these are true appreciation markets where your cash flow is not going to be great, but there's such a high housing demand. A lot of people are moving there that they're going to appreciate pretty substantially, much more than other parts of the country. So there's some markets out there that are true appreciation markets. There's some markets out there that are true cash flow markets. Now, we need to find, in my opinion, I think Charleston it's somewhere on this spectrum, but I feel like we skew closer to the appreciation over the cash flow, especially over the past few years. We are an appreciating market. We have all the demographic trends that are working in our favor, like we talked about earlier today. But it all depends on what your goals are. This is the point I'm trying to make, is you can choose to invest in an appreciating market, or you can choose to invest in a cash flow market. What I'm doing is I still recognize that I'm relatively young and I don't need cash flow at this point in my life, right? I don't need it. And any cash flow that I do have, it's nice, but it's just gonna get reinvested so I can buy more rental real estate. What I need is to grow my net worth and grow wealth through real estate, through appreciation. Cash flow, if I cash flow $200 a month, that's $2,500 a year. Now, if I have that property for 20 years, I just made $50,000 in cash flow. But what if that property appreciates by $50,000 in 2 or 3 years? So I make my investment decisions based on, not speculation. Appreciation you cannot, if you buy a house just thinking it's going to go up in value with no underlying analysis of why you think that, or you have no data to support that, that's what we call speculation. That's how we got 2008. That's how people lose a lot of money in real estate investing, is through speculation. My thought on it is I would rather buy, and how I translate this, I would rather buy in more expensive markets that I know people want to move to. So I'd rather buy in West Ashley, I'd rather buy in James Island, I'd rather buy in Mount Pleasant, than areas like Somerville or Moncks Corner, where I don't think the long-term appreciation prospects really are. You can have a different strategy out there. You can do fix and flips. You can have some other strategies out there. But where I'm at in my personal life is I want more appreciation than cash flow. So that's where my investment decisions are going to be made. That's why I'm not going to go buy a cash-flowing single-family home or even multifamily home in North Charleston. I care more about that appreciation. So it all depends on where you are in life. But last words. Analysis paralysis will keep you on the sidelines. Get off and get underwriting. So get off the couch and get off the sidelines and start underwriting deals. You got to pull the trigger at some point. Everybody wants to think that they're going to be a real estate investor. Everybody thinks about it. Everybody wants to do it, but people are too scared to take the risk. People are too scared to, jump in because of the unknown. They've never done it before. It's uncomfortable, and not only is it uncomfortable, it's uncomfortable with a lot of money. But granted, we're agents, so we deal with this all the time with our clients, whether they're first-time home buyers or not. People are making a very large financial decision. So my best advice to you: knowledge is power. Start listening to Bigger Pockets. Read the books. and learn everything it is about real estate investing. Because once you understand the underlying numbers behind real estate, and you have to, as an investor, you have to forego that inner emotion, because a lot of people make real estate decisions based on their emotions, not the underlying numbers or principles. Get over that. Get over that, and look at the numbers, and if it makes sense, to pull the trigger, right? When you see a deal, you pull the trigger. You have your financing already in order, and you get a house under contract, and now it's an investment property for you. So you got to get off the sidelines. Analysis paralysis will hold you back, and the best way to combat that is knowledge. Get smarter about it. So thank you so much for coming out today. Thank you so much for putting this on. And if you have any questions, go ahead. Be sure you contact me after this. I'll stay behind, and or you can connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, or YouTube. So I'm on all the socials. All right. Thanks, guys.